right, good evening, everyone. Monday, tonight, Daf Yomi is sponsored, very special sponsorship from Jeff and Chava Bela-Wald in honor of their daughter Leora's birthday. Today, December the 1st, Mazel Tov to Leora. And I will try my best to embarrass her in class tomorrow. Say happy birthday.
All right, perfect.
And
She'll love it.
Bis 120 Jahre, after I say in my worst Yiddish accent that I have.
You know, I put that in there. Just I get a kick out of hearing you see do the Yiddish. That's really why it's there now.
Okay, so we had discussed in our Mishnah, right? If two korban olas get mixed up, okay, Reuven's got a korban ola, Shimon's got a korban ola, and they get mixed together. And so now, how are we supposed to bring it? The Mishnah said, well, the coin just brings both of them, figures they're both olas, and says, whoever is this one is this one, whoever's that one's that one. Not a big deal. So we said, yeah, but then who's going to do the smicha? Right? You had to lean on the korban, and you had to do it right before the shechita. So how are you going to do that? You don't know who's supposed to do it. So the answer is, we said it's ladies. It wasn't Reuven and Shimon, it was Laverne and Shirley, and they mixed up their korbanos. And since they mixed up their korbanos, so they are they don't have to smicha. Ladies don't have to do smicha. But what we're suggesting is that if it was men's korbanos, you wouldn't be able to. So that's where we're up to. Ayin Hey Amanalef Esvei Abaye. Abaye asked the question: Korban Yochid shinis ariv bekorban Yochid. Let's say you've got two individuals korbanos that get mixed together, right? Reuven and Shimon mix up their korbanos. The korban sibur shinis ariv bekorban sibur, or two of the community korbanos get mixed together. For example, let's say you have a seer of Rosh Hashanah and a seer of Rosh Chodesh. Right? You have to bring one for Rosh Chodesh, one for Rosh Hashanah. So they're both brought on the same day. They could easily get mixed together. Right? V'korban yochid v'korban tzibur shenis arbu zebazeh. What if you've got an individual, like for example, somebody has to bring a korban chatos of an individual, which is a goat, and a korban chatos of a tzibur that get mixed together. Okay? And you're now right, so for example, you could have we have to try to match up the animals well, because otherwise they don't mix up very well. So we're going to say, let's say it's the seer of a nasi. The seer of a nasi is a male seer, right? The nasi, he brings a korban if he does an avera. So he brings a male goat, if you recall, from Horius. And that would be also the case, the seir, the goat for the shalosh regalim is also a male goat. So they can get mixed up. So what do? Nosing dalad matanos mikol echad ve'echad. So what you do is you've got this blood. So now you were presuming at this point, right? And this is going to be the issue the Gemara is going to discuss. When are we mixing these animals up? So it sounds like we're mixing them up while they're still alive, and then we're going to shech them, and now we've got their blood. And so what do? Now that you've got two containers of blood, you simply apply the blood 4 times from each one of them. And as we've said before, one application is sufficient in order for you to be acceptable. Now, now, if he then says, if you apply the blood 4 times from both of them, from all of them, so then you're yotzei. So that means if you have them mixed together, that means if you accidentally or on purpose or whatever it is, we'll see, mix the blood together into one utensil, and I apply that just 4 times, the mixture 4 times, I'm also yotzei. Okay, b'medvar mamurim. When is that? Shenis arvu chayin. That's only if they got mixed up while they were still alive, right? You mixed them up before they were shechted. Aval nis arvu shchutin. But let's say you did the shchita. Now you've got the blood and you mix it up. So nosin arba matanos mikulon. So then now that it's already mixed, you could just give 4 applications from the mixture. V'im nosin matana achas mikulon yotzan. If you make 1 application, you're also yotzei. That's the first opinion. Rabbi says, Roen es hamatana, we have to take a look at the blood application. Im yesh ba kedei lazeh kedei lazek sheira. New rule that Rabbi says, there's a minimum amount of blood that you have to apply to the mizbeach, right? And if you need to have a minimum amount, which is the amount that goes onto the corner and then goes over onto both sides. Right? Because you're applying on the corner, so it has to be able to get onto the side of the mizbeh, but that means that I need twice as much as that if I've got 2 korbanos here. So that's the suggestion. V'im lav, and if you don't, then psula, then it's going to be no good. Okay, so now, let's figure this out. Katani yochid dum yedet tzibur. So this is talking about an individual and it's talking about a community offering, which means that we're suggesting that the law is the same by the two of them. Ma tzibor gavri af yachid gavri. Tzibor, korbanos tzibor are for the men. Right? Korban tzibor, everybody knows the ladies are not included in the korban tzibor. Why not? Because the korban tzibor is brought from the money that was used for half shekel. Half shekel is done as an obligation upon men to bring the half shekel. So therefore, the korbanos, the korban tzibor is considered a korban on behalf of the men, right? So the ladies don't. Right. So, however, that's the opinion of the Gur Aryeh says that. But then the Chavis Kodesh he quotes down here says, of course, the women have a chelik in the korbanos tzibor. Therefore, the diuk of the Gemara is that just they can't be only ladies in the korban. Of course, men are included as well in the community offering. But the point is that the community offering includes men. So, therefore, the individual offerings that can get mixed up in this Mishnah is also talking about men. So therefore, you can't suggest that our Mishnah is talking about only when ladies' korbanos gets mixed up. There has to be a solution when there are korbanos of men that get mixed up as well. So Amar Rava says, V'tizbera ha-mitaratztehi. He says that Rava answers Abaye. Now, 1 second. You can't explain this Mishnah as it's a brisa. You can't explain this brisa as simple. You can't just read this brisa as such and think that it makes sense. Dekatani, because what does it say? Read this brisa, and it doesn't make very much sense if you actually look closely at it. It says, "Bamedvar murim kishin is arvu chayin." We said that the blood had to get mixed up while they were alive, or the animals got mixed up while they were alive. Aval nis arvu shchutin lo. So, however, once they were slaughtered, then I couldn't. Now, Mali Chaim, Mali Shchutin. What difference would it make, right? After all, at the end of the day, we then say that if you applied that would imply that if I mix the blood together, now I apply the mixture to the walls of the mizbeach, that wouldn't be good. Why would that make any difference? Allah hachi kamar. This is what the brisa has to mean. Bamed dvarim amurim. When is it that this rule applies? Shenis arvu shchutin ke'ein chayim bekosos. When is it that you can apply the blood even though it got mixed up? When the mix-up is just like it would have been mixed up had they been alive. Meaning, the blood is separate and distinct in 4 separate containers, or 2 separate containers, right? If I've got 2 separate cups of blood, then I can apply them separately. Aval bebolel, however, if you mixed the group together, nosin dalad matonos lekulon, then you just have to apply once, right? Because the Mishnah said, that Brisa says, that the rule is that if you mix them up, you got to apply the blood twice. Well, okay, so then that means that that's when you have mixed them up, but you haven't mixed the blood together. It's in 2 separate containers. Then you have to make 2 applications. However, if you mix them together, 1 application is going to suffice. And not only that, then if you make 1 application for all of them, then you're yotze. Rebbe says, we have to evaluate the application, and it's got to have enough in that application to be able to cover both korbanos. And if not, then it's puzzle. Now, that means, well, we're going to discuss that part in a second. But the point was, if you applied, so the brisa is clearly not talking about when the animals got mixed up while they were alive. Now that's critical, because when do you do smicha? You do smicha while the animals are alive. So if the brisa was talking about the mix-up occurred while they were really alive, then you'd have the question, when are you going to do smicha on them? Right? But if alive doesn't mean alive, it means that they are already shechted, but we're considering the blood, we kept the blood separate as though that was separate when they were alive. Well, now we can explain the brisa simply. We shechted that, they did smicha properly, they shechted it, they have the blood, now they mixed it up, but they didn't put the blood together. That's the explanation of the brisa. Therefore, the reason that the brisa doesn't bother us, that it's dealing with men's korbanos, is because the smicha was already performed before, while they were still alive, before we mixed them up. However, yes, it indeed would be a problem had they mixed them up while they were in fact alive. There wouldn't be a circumstance where a man could bring such a korban, only ladies. Okay, so that's the suggestion. Then we get into this part. Then we're going to go into the next part, which we quoted as Rabbi says that we're going to see if there's enough for each one. Roin im yeshba kedei lazeh, then it's kshera v'im la psula. Now, umi islei l'Rebbe hai svara. Does Rabbi really have this idea that there's such a thing as an amount for blood applications? So, V'hatanya, we learn in a brisa, Amar Rabbi says, L'divrei Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, this is talking about para aduma, okay? And what you've got is, Hazah kol shehu mitaheres. So he says that any amount of sprinkling is going to make the person who gets sprinkled purified. So that means, what's the case over there? We've got a container that has ashes, water ash with ashes of the paraduma in it. And into that container falls some water that's regular water. And now we've got a mixture. Now, according to the Rabbanon, the entire water is now puzzle. You can't do it. Why? Because it gets mixed together, and therefore they're all completely mixed. And therefore, since there is a amount of water that you need to have in the sprinkling, since the water that is no good is now mixed in, whatever water drop that you pick in order to sprinkle is going to contain less than the amount of the water that you need as a sprinkling, because it's a sprinkling minus whatever little bit of the portion that came from the non-Kodesh water. But now, even if you do it twice, it's still not going to help because you can't combine sprinklings, right? It's got to be one sprinkling that has the amount of a sprinkling. Therefore, whatever sprinkling you're going to do isn't going to have an amount of a full sprinkling of the paraduma water. I guess this is where holy water comes from, right? Of the paraduma water, and it's going to have too little. So, however, Rabbi Eliezer says, no, that's fine. You just got to make 2 applications. Now, that means, right? Because he holds that the hazah, the sprinkling amount, doesn't have any required shear to it. So, therefore, that because even if you've got some extra water mixed in, that's not going to reduce the amount of valid water that you have from what you need because there's no amount. So if that's the case. So not only that, hazah mechza kosher umechza pasol. So not only that, but let's say you even had half the water in the container was kosher and half the water in it was pasol. Even under those circumstances, right? You're just going to sprinkle twice, and that's going to work, right? Because Rebbe holds that hazah doesn't have any shear, right? So therefore, if that's the case, if hazah has no shear, so then why is Rebbe holding in our Mishnah that the blood application has some kind of minimal amount? So the answer is Lidvarav de Rebbe Eliezer Kamar, right? The answer is that Rebbe is explaining what Rebbe Eliezer would say, right? Rebbe, he's not saying his own opinion. He holds that there is a minimal amount, but he's saying that according to Rebbe Eliezer, who doesn't hold there's a minimal amount, even a greater dilution would be acceptable. That's one answer. And then our second answer is more obvious, is Hazal L'chud v'Nesin L'chud. They're 2 different services, right? Placing blood on the mizbeach and sprinkling water from the paraduma are, just because they both are sprinkles, are not the same service, right? So, right, therefore it's not the same thing at all. So you could have a shear in one, but not a shear in the other. It doesn't bother us.
In English, we've been calling both of them sprinkling, but
yes.
Laura is saying one is hazah.
One is nesina application, because by the chatos, remember, he's actually putting his finger on the corner of the mizbeach, right? So that's...
It's only by chatas that you have to do that.
Correct, because remember, even the calling a sprinkling, what we do by the korban olah or shlamim, is not exactly right either, because we take the blood. Well, we take the blood and we're throwing it on the corner, right? Sprinkling is a bit of a misnomer, right? Sprinkle. Nisarvu bebechor uma meiser. Next case in our Mishnah is that somebody's ola or their shlamim gets mixed up with a bechor animal or a meiser animal. Now, here's the deal with a bechor or a meiser animal. With a ola or a shlamim, if it develops a blemish, so then you can sell it. The animal that gets sold is now not holy anymore. You could eat it however you'd like, and then you take the money and you buy a new animal with it. That's the solution. By a bechor and a meiser, the rule is that when it develops a blemish, it simply loses its kedusha from being kodesh all the way, but you don't redeem it. You just have to eat and consume that meat. However, you consume that meat with certain elements of elevated respect. You cannot take that meat and weigh it on scales or sell it in the marketplace. You have to treat that meat as though it has a certain amount of holiness to it. So now here's our problem, right? Now that we've got these two things together, so what do you got to do? So you got to wait till the animal gets a blemish because you can't offer it as a sacrifice yet. But then even once it gets a blemish, then you sell it, take the money to buy another sacrifice. But the meat that remains has to be treated as though it was a bechor or a meiser as well, just in case. That was our suggestion. Amar Rami Bar Chama. Rabbi Bar Chama says, bechor lebeis Shammai ein ma'achlin lenidos. Rami Bar Chama says that according to Beis Shammai, that a bechor is not allowed to be fed to somebody who has tuma from nida, right? Either a woman who is a nida herself or somebody who has come in contact with a nida, and that comes from Maseches Bechoros, where the pasuk says, they quote over there, the pasuk says, "Ubisaram yalach." The meat is going to be, the flesh of that animal is going to be for you. It gets treated like the waved breast of the animal or the back leg that gets given to the Kohanim. And therefore it explains to us that just as the chazah and shok are not able to be given to women who are tamei nida, because the Torah says, kol tahor beveisecha yochol, so you have to be tahor to eat it. So too, the bechor is not able to be eaten by women that are nida. Okay, so that's our rule. According to Beis Shammai, anyway. Tamura so mahu. What about the rule of a tamura? What if the tamura, somebody exchanges a animal for this bechor? Is that animal also just as prohibited? So bechor eino nifta. You're not able to redeem a bechor, as we said, right? It still retains its holiness. So tamura so mahu. What if you have a tamura of a bechor? Can you redeem that one? Bechor eino nishkal belitra. The rule is that the meat from this bechor that had a blemish cannot be weighed in measures, on scales. Tamura somahu, what about the tamura? The tamura, does that have the same rule? Amar Rava says, Tanya, we learn in a brisa, bechoru meiser, when it comes to a bechor, and meiser mishahumamu, when they get a blemish, osin tamura, they can still have a tamura made into them, meaning an animal can still be exchanged for them illegally, and it will still be a problem of a tamura. And let's say I lost my place. And they have the rule of a tamura that they have every single restriction that would apply to the original animal. So the answer is yes, they can't eat by nida. Yes, they can't be weighed on a scale. Yes, they can't be redeemed. Okay, boy Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama asked the question: Hitfis bechor lebedek habayis. Okay, let's say now we're going to get conflicts here. Okay. Somebody donates his bechor to the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, when you sell an animal, the fact that you can weigh it on a scale obviously elevates its value. Why? Because if I'm going to sell you a steak and I'm going to say, it looks like that's half a pound of meat to me, and the other guy says, no, that's a full pound. So the buyer's going to say, I'm not buying it until you can prove to me it's a full pound, right? So then you're going to have to go with, okay, fine, it's probably like, let's say it's 0.7 pounds or something like that. You're not going to be able to get full value for it if you can't weigh it. So therefore, you're losing value by not being able to use a scale. This meat now got donated to the Beis HaMikdash. Here's what changes. We want the Beis HaMikdash to get the maximum value that it possibly can. So what happens now? Mahu sheyishko belitra. Can you weigh it on a scale now? Because Ravcha de Hektish Adif, do we say, getting the most value for the Beis HaMikdash, that's our priority? Or Dilma Zilus de Bechor Adif, or is our priority not treating the meat of the Bechor poorly? we've got conflicting values. Which is more important? So Rabbi Yossi Bar Zvida says, Toshma, come listen, Nisaru b'chor b'meiser, Yiru ad sheyistaevu. Let's say you mix these korbanos in our Mishnah up, right? You mix up your ola or your shlamim. So then with a bechor or meiser, so you have to let them get a blemish. V'yochlu ki bechor meiser. They have to be eaten specially. Treat the meat like a bechor and meiser. Lav l'meimra de'eno nishkal b'litra. Isn't that telling you that they can't be weighed, right? And despite the fact, weighing it would help us a lot, because then the money value that you would get for this would then get you a nicer korban. That is what you're purchasing. So therefore, don't you see that the meat is of higher importance? So Rav Huna v'Rav Chizkiya Talmidei de Rabbi Yirmiyah Omri. So Rav Chizkiya and Rav Huna, they were students of Rabbi Yirmiyah, and they said, Midami, that's not similar. Hasam shtei kedushos u'shnei gufin. There, right, you've got two different animals, and you've got two different holinesses, right? In other words, because what's the situation? This animal is either a shlamim or it's not. It's either a bechor or it's either a bechor or a shlamim. So what are you going to do? You're going to tell me that I'm selling it. Why? Because it's a shlamim. Okay, but then if it's a shlamim, it's not a bechor. Then that means that I would be able to weigh it. That's one issue. Or it's a bechor, which means I don't have to sell it, but then there's no issue of weighing it. So basically, if I'm not weighing it because it's a bechor, then I'm hurting the shlamim. But if I do weigh it, I'm hurt because it's a shlamim, then I'm hurting its status as a bechor. The bottom line is it's two different animals that got mixed up, and I'm going to treat one disrespectfully in order to help me fix the other one. That's too. You can't sacrifice the holiness of one in order to support the value of the other. So hacha here though shtei kedushas v'guf echad. Here I've got one animal, right? It's one animal that was a bechor that got donated. So it is both things. So therefore, your question is actually, Mike, the question stands, right? Which is the priority? You can't say, well, if he weighs it, then he's degrading the animal, the meat. Not necessarily, because this animal itself is also getting sold for the best value. So it's actually being helpful, this meat. So therefore, this animal itself is being helped whichever way you treat it. So that's the issue. It's different when it's one animal versus two. Okay, so Maskif lo Rav Yossi Bar Abin. So Rav Yossi Bar Abin asked the question: Ma ilu Omar hefdu li bechor shehitfisu lebedek habayis klum shomin lo. Listen, let's say a person would say, I want you to redeem for me a firstborn animal that was consecrated for the bedek habayis. Well, you can't redeem a bechor. Right? This guy says, hey, go redeem the bechor for me because I want to use that money for the upkeep of the base of Mikdash. Well, that's very nice, but you're not allowed to redeem it, so therefore you can't listen to him. Okay, well then that proves the bechor, the kedusha of the bechor is the priority over the value of the money given to the base of Mikdash. So that's your answer. So,
what is it supposed to do with the bechor then? What is the hekdesh supposed to do with the bechor? Just gonna sit there, can't do anything with it.
Yeah. So that's a fair question, right? I guess. Well, they can eat it, right? Serve it as a.
Okay.
They can serve it for dinner that night for whoever's working in the base of Mikdash, right?
With mashed potatoes and steamed veggie or whatever.
That's correct. As we said, cook in any way that you like, right? So that's exactly so. So because it says have to. So he says.
Like in Lakewood and Brooklyn.
1 second, how do we read that? Hafdu. So he says, well, 1 second. So why don't we ask the question and say we should redeem it. So Rahman Amar lo tipadeh. The pasuk says lo tifteh. The pasuk says you can't, right? So therefore, since the Torah says you're not allowed to do it, so of course there's no distinction, right? We're not gonna. You're not going to be able to say where there's going to be a benefit to the base of Mikdash or not benefit to the base of Mikdash, because this pasuk says, the Torah says, you just can't redeem it. That's it. So, however,
saying there's a massive, like he's really big.
by weighing the meat on a scale, which is only an Issur D'Rabbanan, that's not necessarily the case, right? You're comparing apples to oranges. One is a Torah prohibition, so of course we wouldn't be allowed to redeem it. But as far as weighing it on a scale, that's only merely a rabbinic extra. So Ella Amar of Ami says, Klum hikno ze ela masha konoi lo. The answer is, when a person consecrates a bechor, this is a Kohen, obviously that's how he has the bechor, right? He consecrates the bechor. What is it that he's consecrating? He's consecrating whatever he had. He had an animal that he himself could consume or he could sell without weighing it. Therefore, when he donates that to the Beis HaMikdash, he is donating an animal that you cannot weigh, that has a lesser value. So he's donating an item of lesser value. Therefore, whatever he has, that's what he's donating. So of course he can't weigh it. You can't say the Beis HaMikdash is able to get the extra value, because that's not what he donated. He didn't donate the animal with extra value. He donated an animal of lesser value.
The whole premise of the whole sugya is, of course, the Beis HaMikdash needs to get as much money as it can.
That's correct.
Right?
Yes.
Right?
That's exactly right.
So maybe we should cut corners here and get the Beis HaMikdash more money.
That's idea. Yes, that's the maybe. Or do you look at, hey, a bechor is a bechor. You got to treat it nicely.
It's almost like it's a modern day question. It's analogous to modern day questions. The Torah says don't do this, but we need to do this. So maybe the Torah didn't mean it there.
Remember, it's only D'Rabbanan though. Right, so that makes it a little bit extra, right?
I remember. There's no shortcut to Gemara. Sorry.
Well, I'm glad the Gemara actually gave a final answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Sold.
right?
There's some things you really
You just can't break it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Some things are worth more than money, right? But that's not why it's an answer, right? The Gemara answers that it doesn't have that value. That's just the way you got to look at this. It doesn't have that value. So you're not losing value. It's donated because it has lesser, it just makes, it's sold that way because it has lesser value. That's it.
It's not a loss. It's not a gain.
Exactly. It's not a loss, but not a gain. It's a good way of putting it. Okay, now, Hakol Yecholin Lis Arev. So then the Mishnah said, you're able to mix up all kinds of karbanos. The only things that you cannot mix up, you can't mix up a chatos and an asham. Those are two things that you cannot mix up. So the Gemara says, Ma'ishna chatos ve'asham. Why can't you mix up a chatos and asham? I can mix up anything, right? So the answer is, dahai zachar v'hai nekeva. The answer is, because a chatos is a female animal, and a asham is a male animal. So you can usually tell the difference between male and female animals. You're not going to get mixed up. Yeah, but so then chatos ve'ola nami. So what about a chatos and an ola? Chatos is a female animal, and ola is a male animal. As we looked through the chumash before, we saw every ola is a male animal. Okay, so the answer is Ika Seir Nasi. The answer is because there is a male chatos. Right? Chatos is a male animal. That is when the Nasi, as we said just earlier, right? The Nasi, his goat is male. So therefore you could mix up a chatos with an ola. So the answer is, okay, so Hai Seir v'Hai Tzemer. He says, yeah, but you can't mix those up at the end of the day because, after all, one has hair, one has wool. So therefore, you can't mix up, right? So you can't mix up a chatos and an asham because one's goats, one's a ram.
We never would have thought of that question because we don't know anything about it.
Correct. Right? Everybody go, yeah, no, they are very different looking. Goats and sheep are very different looking. Turns out, okay, well, Pesach the Asham Nami lo me'arev. You can't mix up a Pesach and an Asham either. Because why? Hai ben shana v'hai ben shnei shanim. Right? A Pesach is always an animal in its first year, young animal, and an Asham is always in its second year. It's older. So therefore, you're not going to confuse those. So the answer is Ika Asham Nazir v'Asham Mitzorah. Number one, there is an Asham that can be brought in its first year. The Asham of a Nazir and Asham and Mitzorah are animals that are younger. So that's first of all. V'boisim, or else if you want, Ika ben shana demichsi ke ben shtei shanim. Sometimes an animal looks young for its age, right? Or old for its age, right? Of course, sometimes you've got an animal that's 1 year old that looks 2. V'ika ben shtayim demichsi ke ben shana. And you could have a 2-year-old that looks like 1. It doesn't have, right? That made sense to me, right? I'm like, can you really tell? If I was walking along and I saw, like, I'll go to the petting zoo and I ask, how old is that animal? And they're like, it's 2 years old. I'm like, that animal does not look 2 years old. It's way younger. Wow. That's amazing, that
They're
animal.
both at 1.5.
That's correct. I would never have thought. Okay, so therefore, okay. But the fact that chatos is always a goat and a osham is always a sheep makes it so that you're not going to mix those two up. Okay, so that's fair. Says the next Mishnah. Osham shinus ariv bishlamim. Now let's mix up an osham and a shlamim together. Okay, what do you got to do? We're going to try to. So Rabbi Shimon says, what we're going to do is we're going to try to combine the laws of an osham and a shlamim together, such that you can offer this korban without violating any rules. How so? Omer shneim yishchatu b'tzafon. Okay, so that means you got to take both animals. Got to slaughter them both in the north. Even though shlamim doesn't have to be slaughtered in the north, it can be slaughtered in the north. So therefore, slaughter them both in the north. V'yochlu kechamor shebahem. And then you're going to eat it like the stringent, like the osham, meaning 1 day, 1 night. Even though shlamim's got 2 days and 1 night, you got to eat it in 1 day, 1 night, because it might be an osham. Amru lo, so they said to him, Ein mevi'in kodshim lebeis apsul. You're not allowed to do that. The rule is that you cannot intentionally make a sacrifice have limited consumption. Meaning, if something is really allowed for 2 days and 1 night, you cannot sacrifice it and turn it into an animal that is only able to be eaten for 1 day and 1 night, because you may be invalidating a still valid offering. In the second day, we're going to have to consider this to be invalid despite the fact that it is still valid. Therefore, there is a rule. You are not allowed to intentionally, says the Chamim, you're not allowed to intentionally reduce the consumptibility of a kodesh item. So therefore they say, can't do it, right? Can't bring it. We're going to have to suggest that it's going to be like the animals we said that we mixed up in the last Mishnah, kodshim b'kodshim, and you're going to let it out to pasture and sell the animals and buy new ones. Nisarvu chatichos bechatichos. Let's say now the animal's already cut up into pieces. Okay, so you've got pieces of animals being mixed up. Kodshe kodshim bekodshim kalim. So then you've got kodshe kodshim mixed up with kodshe kalim. Hanecholim liyom echad. Those pieces that can be eaten for 1 day, necholim l'shnei yomim. Ones that can be eaten only for 1 day are being mixed up with ones that can be eaten for 2 days. V'layla and for the night, yochlu kechamor sheba, and then you consume those like in 1 day, 1 night. Now we're going to ask the question: why is that okay?
Because you already did it.
Because you already did it.
You
Right?
can't put them up.
Can't put it back. Right? Can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's already too late. They're already mixed up.
You already
So-
rubbed the lamp.
That's correct. So one is lechatchila, one is b'diavad, as we already started to see. Says the Gemara, Tani Tana Kamei Rav. They taught this brisa. They taught this teaching. This is it a brisa that we're taking brisa, or this Mishnah in front of Rav. Right. So, and he says like this: Shvius ein lokchin bidameha truma. Shmita, you can't take Shemitah year produce and use it to buy truma. Okay, so let's say this guy's a Kohen, and now there's no such thing as truma that's grown during a Shemitah year, because everything is hefker, and there's no obligation in truma on things that are hefker. So during the Shemitah year, this guy's got crops that grow by themselves, and he has this truma, or he buys. He's got this shvius produce, but he wants to do a trade, so he trades the Shemitah for something that is truma. Okay, can't do that. Why? Because when it comes to shvius, when it comes to Shemitah produce, you have a limited time to eat it. The rule, says the Torah, is you can eat the Shemitah produce as long as there remains some of this type of product still in the field that's hefker. Once that crop no longer exists in the field, now comes the time of biur. You have to destroy. If you've ever been in Eretz Yisrael during a Shemitah year, I was zochet to be in Eretz Yisrael. My years of learning was a Shemitah year, and all of it was very exciting. It was like every year, every couple of weeks, there's a new halacha, and I'm like, what? It's like, yes, we can't eat oranges anymore. So therefore, now that there are no oranges, so everybody's got to destroy all of their oranges, right? So there's no more oranges, right? But they had they published a dates of all the different fruits and vegetables. At what time? When's there's man biur, right? That was published. So therefore, you know when you have to get rid of them. Okay. The problem is that truma doesn't have to be destroyed. If you buy flour of truma, you can keep it for multiple years, right? But if I buy it with Shemitah produce, now I've got to destroy this flour because it's Shemitah produce. So therefore, I cannot do that because I am destroying the truma. Because you're reducing its consumptibility. That's what we learned. Amru Rabbanan Kame de Rava. So the Rabbanan said this in front of Rava. Hadelo Rabbi Shimon. That is not like Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah. Di Rabbi Shimon Amar Mevin Kodshim LeBeis Apsul. He says you're no problem. You can bring these korbanos to shech them, right? He says Amar Lahu Afilu Tamer Rabbi Shimon. He says no. Even Rabbi Shimon wouldn't let you do this. Hani Mili Diavad. This is when the animals got mixed up already. Right? So now he's like, okay, they're already mixed up. Now you can go ahead and do your shechita, right? Better to do it than not to do it, right? The Chum say don't do it even there, right? But he says, okay, it's b'diavad lechatchila lo, but not lechatchila, right? You can't intentionally go to the store with your shmita produce and buy truma. That's the lechatchila. Lechatchila lo, who says you can't do that lechatchila? Esvei Abaye. Abaye asked the following question: the kulan roshoy and kohanim l'shanos ba'achila son. That the kohanim say, right, that when they're going to eat their korbanos, so what you're allowed to do is you can eat them any way that you want, right? You can, as you would have said, you can eat it with mashed potatoes, whatever. You could roast it, shalukin. You could cook it. You could you could stew it or whatever. Shlukin is it's not cooked. It's cooked. I guess overcooked, right? Muvushalin and cooked. Velaseis lisochan tavle chulin, and you could put spices on it that you like. V'tavle truma, you could put truma spices in mine. Sorry, you put it on truma spices. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. That's what Rabbi Yishmael says. Okay, now Amar Le says hanach l'truma. So he says, well, okay, how can you put truma spices on it? If you put truma spices on your korbanos, now you got to eat in 2 days. Max. That's reducing your consumptibility of your truma. How could you do that? So Amar Lei, so he says back, Hanach l'trumas tavlin dirabon. He says, you know why? Because truma on spices is rabbinic in the first place. Truma min Torah only is on wheat and grapes. All vegetables and herbs and all of those things is all dirabanan. So therefore, since it's only a dirabanan, that's why better to spice up your korban and get a nice rub, right, on your korban. That's better than not.
It's more of a classic
It's consumptibility because that gezerah derabanan this rule, but that's acceptable because it's only a derabanan. That's right. Esvei, so he asked the following question further. Ein lochen truma bekesef meiser. You're not allowed to purchase truma with money that's from meiser sheni. Meiser sheni has to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Now you've taken truma, which can be eaten anywhere, and you've bought it with meiser sheni, which means that if you bring it outside of Yerushalayim and consume it there, you're going to invalidate it. Mipnei shebemayit b'achilasa, because you are now reducing its consumptibility. Now it's by location rather than by time, right? For Rabbi Shimon matir, Rabbi Shimon says that's okay. So therefore, you see, Rabbi Shimon says even lechatchila it's okay. Ishtikle, he didn't answer him. He thought that's okay. That's a fair point. Okay, I like that. It's a good point. Okay, Kiyalas l'kamei de Rav Yosef. When they came before Rav Yosef, Amrli said to him, "Amai lo tosvei meho." Why didn't he ask him from this? I've got another source that proves it. Why didn't he ask him from here? Ein mevashlin yerek shel shvius b'shemen shel truma. You're not allowed to cook vegetables that are shmita vegetables in oil that's truma oil. Okay, because now it mixes together, and now the oil becomes mixed with the shmita, and you can't, and it's going to reduce it. Shelo yaviu kodshim lebeis apsul. Rabbi Shimon matir. Rabbi Shimon says it's mutter. There's another proof that Rabbi Shimon says even lechatchila it's okay. Amar le Abaye. Abaye says v'lav mius vise meha de tavlin. He says v'amar li hanach trumas tavlin derabanan. He says, what are you talking about? I've already asked one time about the question about spices, and you told me that spices were only of rabbinic nature. So therefore, it seems that Abaye had thought that we were talking about the vegetables being the truma and the oil being the shmita produce, in which case the vegetables are only rabbinic. And so therefore that's the point. So achanami, trumas yerek derabanan, the vegetables are only rabbinic. So he says, Ihachi, ipchami boile. If we were talking about the vegetables being the truma, then the question would have been reversed. right? Then Yerek shel truma would have said vegetables of truma b'shemen shel shvius with oil that's shmita. So therefore, the point is that that's not how the question stands. The question that he's asking is the truma is the oil, and the vegetables are the shmita. Therefore, we're dealing in deoraisas, and even though we're still dealing in Torah prohibitions, Rabbi Shimon says it's mutter. So that is a proof. Okay? So therefore, so that is okay. That could have been a good answer. That could have been a good question also. So v'lav mi osvise mi masnisin. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, right? I already asked against Rava above, and I asked him from a Mishnah, right? An Asham that got mixed together with a Shlomim, which dematir Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says that's mutter. Va'amar li, and he said back to and the answer and he said back to me, di orev. So it was already mixed together, past tense. So hachanami, that's why I didn't want to ask the question about this oil mixed together with vegetables. Is this could be a case of b'diavad? It was already mixed. Not that you're allowed to mix it intentionally. It was already mixed. Di orev. So now, Edi Ariv, my tamahu d'Rabbanan. If it was already mixed, well, I don't understand how the Rabbanan permit it, right? Where the Rabbanan are saying it's, how do the Rabbanan say that it's not permitted? Sorry, it's already mixed. What are they supposed to do about it? Right? How do the Rabbanan say that it's puzzle, right? Because it's you didn't do anything, you didn't mix it. So what are you supposed to do? Midi dehava ashamu shlamim. So he says, well, what do the Rabbanan tell you to do about it? The Asham and the Shlamim. The Asham and Shlamim, you can't bring the Shlita. So he says, Mi Dami, that's not a similar case. Hasam Islay Takanta Bere'iyah. When it comes to the Mishnah, we had a solution. You could let those animals go out to pasture, develop a blemish, sell them, and you're good. Halesli Takanta. So he says, Takanta Bere'iyah. Here, you can't let these vegetables get a blemish. Right? What are you going to do? They're already mixed. There's nothing you can do. So, this case is more similar to the second part of the Mishnah, where the pieces of meat were already mixed together, where we all knew that was b'diavad, and even where the chachamim tekevin deleis takanta tocho chamur shebahen. There we said, as we pointed out, since there's no other way to fix it, then even the Rabbanan agreed you could eat it. So okay, so. Maskif Ravina. So therefore, that's why I didn't ask the question. So therefore, that can't be already mixed, is the point. Because if it's already mixed, of course the Rabbanan would hold its mutter. So therefore, it has to be a lechatchila question, where Rabbi Shimon says lechatchila I can mix it, and the Rabbanan say you cannot. It's possible you cannot mix it. Okay. Maskif Ravina. Ravina says mi domi chaticha shebechatichos leis leitachanta klal. So he says, well, 1 second, that still you can't compare, because the pieces that got mixed together, there's nothing you can do to fix that. It's already mixed. Hi, isle takanta, beschita. Here, you could squeeze the oil off the vegetables. Right? You got vegetables, just squeeze the oil off. For Rav Yosef, hechi nischot. So Rav Yosef says, 1 second. That's what he's saying. That's why the Rabbanan say it's puzzle. So, no, Rav Yosef says, how are you supposed to squeeze oil off of vegetables? How are you supposed to get the oil off the vegetables? Nischot tuva, if you squeeze it really well, so then kamafsid b'shvius, you're going to ruin the vegetable. And destroying Shemitah produce intentionally is prohibited. So you can't destroy the Shemitah, so you can't aggressively squeeze this vegetable and get the oil out. Nischot purta, if you squeeze it a little bit, sof-sofi, a ruvim yarif, then the oil is not coming off. So therefore, you've got no choice. Once it's already mixed up, it's mixed up.
The president suggests taking a roll of Bounty.
Pat it dry, right? Something. Wash it off heavily, right? Dishwashing detergent.
Rabbi stopping for more freshness.
Yes, sir. Esvei Rabbi Shimon, Esvei. So, okay, so we ask another follow-up question. Abaye asks Rava a following question, right? Here's another brisa. We already have knocked off Rava on this point. We're just going to keep going after him. So he asks him, Rabbi Shimon says, L'macharas, mevi ashamo velugo imo. Okay, so this is an exciting case. We don't know. We've got a guy who's a Metzora, but we're not really, not sure whether he was in private all this time because he was ordered to be in private, because he was a muchlat, he was a Nazar muchlat, or whether he was a Metzora who had to just wait to see whether his nega would spread.
What is that?
Muchlat means he was, officially there's a psak, the Kohen established and said, you are a Metzora. The difference is that if he was established as somebody who had tzaras, he has korbanos to bring. The other guy doesn't have korbanos to bring. So now we have a doubt. Now there's tons of doubts all along what you're supposed to do along the way, but we're going to skip to day number 8. He's got korbanos to bring. And now he's got a korban osham mitzora that we've been talking about, and he's got a lug of oil, right? We've talked about this mitzora offering that he's going to bring, and he's got a we said like a gallon of oil that he's supposed to bring as along with it. So how are you supposed to bring it? Because if he's obligated to bring the korban, he can't do anything. He can't eat any korbanos or anything until he brings this korban. If he doesn't have a korban, he can't walk into the Beis Hamikdash with an osham and a gallon of oil and say, okay, here you go. It's not a korban, it's chulin. You can't bring chulin into the azara. So what are you supposed to do? So Rabbi Shimon says, limachras, the next day on day number 8, mevi ashamo velugo imo. He brings his korban asham and his lug of oil together with him. Ve'omer, and here's how he does it. Im shal mitzora, if I am a mitzora, this is a korban of mitzora, hare ze ashamo vezelugo. Then the Kohen says, this is going to be his korban asham, this is going to be his lug. Ve'im lav, and if he's not, so then asham zeh shel shalmei nedava, then this asham becomes a shlomim, okay, which is interesting because a shlomim now is going to have less days to eat it, right, than a normal shlomim would. And also asham ta'on shchita b'tzafon. Now that asham has to be treated like a safek asham, safek shlomim. So what do you got to do? You got to shecht it in the north. Umatan behonos usmicha. So then you need to apply the blood of it to the fingers, the thumbs, the ear, the toe of the person who has tzaras, as though it was in asham. Usmicha, you're going to do smicha on it, like a shlamim. And because we said we don't do the by asham metzora, we don't do that. 1 second, we do that. Usmicha, smicha unesachim. Uchnufas chazav shok. So we're going to do all of these like a korban shlamim. You're going to do the smicha on it, and then you're going to bring these nesachim, the wine that comes with it, and you're going to wave the chest and the hind leg like you would all as part of a shlamim. So we're basically doing all the asham procedures plus all the shlamim procedures to it because they don't necessarily negate each other. Right? There's nothing wrong with if you took an asham and waved it, it doesn't mean she didn't do anything, right? So you're going to treat it like an asham, you treat it like a shlamim simultaneously. V'nechol liyom v'layla, and you're going to eat it for 1 day and 1 night. So how can you do that? That means that Rabbi Shimon is saying, lecharchila, go ahead and do that. So the answer is, tikune gavra shani. That's not a proof because you've got a guy who's in trouble here. Right? The guy he's stuck. He's not sure whether he needs to bring it or not. He can't not do anything. So therefore, since we have to fix this guy, we have no choice. So we're going to bring this korban and create the problem only because we have no choice. So hatinach asham, okay, fine, I get the korban asham. But you still got this lug, Michael Amimber. What are you doing with this gallon of oil? What are you doing with this lug of oil that you've got? Da'amar, lug zeh yehein nedava. He says, okay, it's either the lug of oil because I'm a metzora, or it's a lug of oil as a gift korban. Because you can bring a nadava, we're going to learn, you can bring a oil as a korban mincha. Normally a mincha offering we think of as flour or those things, but you can bring oil as a mincha. How do you do kmitza on oil, right? So there's arguments about how to do that kmitza on oil, whether you pour a little bit off into a side container or whether you actually scoop it up just like you would, and you put it in. It's kmitza. You're just treating it like a korban mincha.
Okay, you're thinking you can only give an animal for korban mincha. Now you think oil?
So yeah, because the oil is part of what the mitzora has to bring too, right? It's not a kosher mitzora offering without the oil. So what are you supposed to do? So v'dim alav mitzorahu. So maybe now we're going to have a problem because now the procedure is going to contradict. It's a mincha offering or it's the mitzora's log. Here's how that's going to be a problem. If he's not a mitzora, and it is a mincha offering, uboy mikamitz, he's going to have to do kmitza. The log of oil of mitzora doesn't need kmitza. Okay, de mikamitz. So fine, he does kmitza.
You don't put the frankincense on it either, right?
Correct. We're not putting any frankincense. We're just because his donation is only the oil, so that's fine. He can do that, right? But you're going to need kmitza because it's a mincha offering. So okay, he does kmitza. The problem is if he does kmitza, v'dilma mitzorahu, maybe he's a mitzora. Uboy matan sheva. So now he's got to sprinkle the blood on him 7 times. He's got to apply 7 times. He's got to sprinkle the blood towards the kodesh 7 times. So he says, okay, to Yohiv, he does that. Now, v'hai chaser lei. So now you're going to have a problem. The halacha of a mincha offering is after you've done kmitza, the rest of the offering cannot be destroyed. So you now take this lug and you take some of the. One second, make sure that I'm doing it right. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Right. Once he's done the kmitza, the lug of oil now has less than a lug. So now, if he's got less than a lug, how can he sprinkle it as though it's a mitzora if he's got less than a lug left? So the answer is demaisi purta umamali. So he's going to do the kmitza. We'll pour a little bit more in, refill it, and now that's the solution.
How's that the solution? You can't take a little bit of kmitza and then add a little in like it's.
Oh, so your problem's going to be, but all of the oil that's left, that's going to be what's the problem with it? All of the oil that's left in the container is a mincha offering that has had kmitza, except the new part. The new oil you just added in has no kmitza. Yeah. So how are you going to bring it as a mincha now if you haven't done kmitza on that little piece, on that little bit, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem. So now, Ditznan, we learned a Mishnah. Chaser halug ad shelo yotzak. What is the rule by mitzora? Let's say he winds up spilling a little bit of the oil before they did it. Yimalenu, so just fill it up. That's not a problem, right? You can always add more oil to make sure that you have enough. However, v'ha boy haktara. Now you're going to have to take. If it's a mincha offering, you've got to burn the rest of this offering. Let's make sure we're talking about the right side here. Yeah, so now you're going to take the kmitza and you got to burn it. So now, Dr. Lay, okay, so what's the big deal? So the Kohen's going to burn the kmitza that he took off. So Amos, question is, when is he burning the kmitza? At what point? Ibasar matanos sheva, if he took the kmitza, right? And now, then he sprinkles he sprinkles 7 times, right? And then he burns the kmitza. Well, then we've got a problem. Havalu shirayim shechasru bein kmitza laktara. We have an invalidating procedure in a mincha. Something that we are going to learn about korban mincha is that when you take the kmitza, you take that kmitza and you burn it on the mizbeach. If something happens to the remaining flour in the container, but before you burn it, it invalidates the offering. If this is indeed a mincha, you've done kmitza, great. Then you took the oil and you sprinkled it as though it was a mitzora. But if he wasn't a mitzora, you've just destroyed your korban mincha by removing some of that oil from the remainder. Okay, so fine. Vein maktir nesa kometz, vein maktir nesa kometz alein. And then that would mean that you're not allowed to burn it. And then there's no good. Okay, great. So then we'll be fine. What we'll do is we'll take the kmitza, go right to the mizbeach, burn that first. Then we'll come back and we'll sprinkle the rest of the oil for the mitzora. So then that's a problem. Kol shemimenu liishim harehu bebal taktiru. Says we have a procedure that when you have a korban that some of it is burned on the mizbeach, you're not allowed to have any more of it consumed by the mizbeach. Right? It becomes consumable by people, not by the mizbeach. You can't take the meat of a korban that is supposed to be consumed by people and bring it up on the mizbeach. So now you've done this. If you sprinkle this, it's this sprinkling has the same halacha as burning because it's being used for service, holy service. So therefore, you are in violation. You've already burned the kmitza on the mizbeach. You can't now come and sprinkle more of it on the otherwise. So Amar of Yehuda Breder Reb Shimon ben Pazi. So Rav Yehuda, the son of Reb Shimon ben Pazi, explains, Demasek lahu l'shem eitzim. What he does is that he is he's allowed. There's a rule that you can take something that's you're not sure whether you're supposed to burn it on the mizbeach or not. So you can burn it on the mizbeach, but you burn it for saying that if this is a mincha offering, then I'm going to burn. Then this is going to be a valid burning it, right? So he goes like, one second.
So I guess just like you can use it for the wood, you can also do the sprinkling.
Yeah, so we're gonna. So what we're gonna do is the sprinkling of the oil is the Kohen has in mind that if this is a asham for the mitzorah, so then I'm sprinkling the oil. If it's a mincha, then I'm just throwing water around. It's nothing. It's not in anything. It's not a service. And since he makes that condition, then that's effective. And so therefore he hasn't violated any prohibition against using something for the mizbeach that is not allowed. Detanya, and we know that that's permitted because we learned in a brisa. Rabbi Eliezer says, "L'reach nichoach." It says that when it comes to the burning of you're not allowed to burn se'or udvash. You're not allowed to burn leavened product or honey on the mizbeach. Okay, so that's what the pasuk says.
Sticky situation.
Yes, ki kol se'or v'chol dvash lo saktir mimena ishal Hashem. You're not allowed to burn that on the mizbeach. So iya tamale, you're not allowed to bring it up on the mizbeach. Aval tamale l'shem eitzim. However, let's say you brought it up and you just want to burn it for like wood, so then that that's not a prohibition of that is not a Torah prohibition, not a Torah violation. If all you did was bring it up as wood. Now, what's everybody's feeling here? You want to 5 more minutes till the Mishnah? 5 more minutes till the Mishnah.
Anyway, so let's do it.
That's what I'm saying. So okay. Now, v'ha'ika shirayim. Okay. So now back to the log. So therefore, we've solved that problem. You're allowed, even when there's a prohibition against burning something on the mizbeach. Clearly, if you have in mind intention that although I'm burning it, I'm not intending to burn it, that will be okay. That's what we've just proven. Now, even if that's solved, we still have another problem. What do you have to do with the remainder after the kmitza and applying that remainder of the oil? What do you do with it? Deboy michlinhu, right? The Kohen's supposed to consume it. Ve'ikahach purta de lo kamitz ilave. So you've got this little piece, this little bit, as you pointed out in the beginning. You did kmitza at the very beginning, and then you refilled the oil. That amount that you refilled has not had a kmitza. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to, how are you supposed to consume? It's prohibited to be able to be eaten, so you've got no kmitza on that. So the answer is, diparikle. So the answer is, when he adds on to this oil, he says, this oil, if it is for the mitzorah, so then I'm adding it for the kedusha of the mitzorah. So, however, if, however, what I'm adding into this container is for my mincha, then it doesn't have kedushas haguf. It only has monetary kedusha, in which case it's not going to be a prohibition if you consume it, because it doesn't have the same status as the rest of the mincha offering.
Just as a big chiddush, right? You could take, like, it's a mincha, which is kodesh kodashim, and you're mixing other things into it, right? So if I have my mincha and I add poppy seeds to it or whatever, is that going to be an invalid mincha just because I added something to it? Seems not, right? If I add something else to it that's not kodesh, I can do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, The problem is going to be deparik le heicha. So now, he's now going to then transfer the kedusha from the oil onto money, and now the money is going to be given to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, he's redeeming it. Okay, now that's going to be able to allow you to. He's going to redeem the entire thing, and therefore they're going to be able to eat. The Kohanim are now going to be able to eat all of the oil. If it's Asham Mitzvah, it's an Asham Mitzvah. If it's not, it's redeemed oil. Now here's our problem. Deparik lehecha. Where are you doing this redeeming? You've got this whole container of oil, and you've got to redeem it. I gavai. If the oil container is inside of the Beis Hamikdash area, kama'ayachul lazara, then you're in violation. You're not allowed to bring something that is non-consecrated into the Beis Hamikdash area. V'iyabroi.
Well, you didn't do. It wasn't. It was Kodesh before. Now.
Oh, that's the answer. But then hang on a second. Right? I'm glad you're right. Glad you thought that made perfect sense, because that did not make as perfect sense to me as it made perfect sense to you. So that means I explained it really well. V'iyabroi. If it was outside, that he brought this whole korban, he brought this whole thing outside and redeemed it. So if solibiyotze, then it's going to be problematic, because it was kodesh still when he brought it out, and you're not allowed to bring things can't bring a mincha outside of the Beis Hamikdash. It has to be consumed inside. So the answer is lo olam gavai. It's inside. Chulin meila havyan. He didn't bring chulin in; it became chulin afterwards. That's not a problem. Now, Gemara wants to know, okay, all this was Rabbi Shimon's answer, right? The whole thing was Rabbi Shimon's answer to how to solve this problem. The problem is, Rabbi Shimon ein misnadvin shemen. How does Rabbi Shimon suggest that the whole solution is that you can make a mincha? Rabbi Shimon has the halacha that we're going to see in Daf Tzadi Aleph coming up. You can't you can't donate oil as a korban. So that's going to So the answer is, Tikuni Gavrashani. He says, no, you're not supposed to generally, but again, you can under extreme circumstances, and this is an extreme circumstance. You've got a guy who needs to be fixed. Yosef Rav Rechumi Kami de Ravina. So Rav Rechumi was sitting before Ravina. Yosef Kami says like this: Mishmei Rav Huna bar Tachlifa, the name of Rav Huna bar Tachlifa. V'nema Osham Zeh Yehei Osham Tolui. Why did he have to make this Osham perhaps as a shlamim?
Question. I didn't want to ask that.
I'm glad he's got it. Okay. Good. He says, why don't you just say, hey, you know what? I'm not sure if I have to bring an Osham or not. Therefore, it's an Osham Tolui. So, Shma Mina, so you can see from here, right, that Rabbi Shimon does not say such a thing, is Man Tana de Poligale de Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Shimon, who is the one who disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer in Meseches Krisos, right? He says, it's Rabbi Shimon, Da'amar ein misnadvin Osham Tolui, who says, you can't donate an Osham Tolui.
Right? You're saying there's other people who say you can? But Osham Tolui.
That's what it says, correct. So, you have to have it has to be a clear suffix. Meaning, you have to have done something that you know could have been usher, and therefore you bring an Osham Tolui. Here, it's really a doubt whether he has a korban. That's a different type of a suffix here, right? I'm not sure if I am obligated or not. So therefore, that you can't donate an Osham Tolui is his point, right? Now, that means this is Rabbi Shimon's opinion. He says you're not allowed to donate an Osham Tolui. That's why he says you can't do it as an Osham Tolui. Amar le, so Ravina says to Rav Rechumi, Torah, Imri bedichrei michal filoch. He says, where's the Torah in that kind of an answer, right? That's not correct. He says, look, you have a sheep and you've got a ram, right? Well, the Osham Metzora is a sheep, and an Osham Tolui is a ram. So therefore, you can't bring one animal and say, hey, it's an Osham Tolui just to get, you can't, that doesn't work. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work as a, right? Now see, this is where the Osham Tolui is, where he's not bringing the Osham Tolui because, I don't think he's bringing the Osham Tolui because he's not sure whether he's a Mitzorah or not. He would bring the Osham Tolui because he's suggesting I can donate that, right? Meaning, if I'm a Mitzorah, I have to bring an Osham. If I'm not a Mitzorah, well, then I don't have to bring anything. But I'd like to bring an Osham Tolui because I'd like to. I have no Avera that I've done, but I'd like to. So according to one opinion, he says you could. He says, no, because the reason why Rabbi Shimon, even according to the opinion that says you could have donated the Yasham Taloi, that wouldn't solve Rabbi Shimon's problem because they're two completely separate animals. So therefore, wouldn't have made that mistake. Okay, there you go.
Beautiful. Yeah. Wow. Amazing.